This show is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. The content on this show is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such condition.
This is Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton, exploring the science of functional medicine and the power of healing from within. Breathe in. Breathe out. And now your host, Dr. Beth Claxton.
Hi, welcome to Rooted in Healing. I'm Dr. Beth Claxton. Today we have an episode that's very near and dear to my heart and my life experience. And to begin this episode, I first want to tap into our human condition and how we are programmed, especially now in our world, our crazy world, to be reactive. And I know that this begins when we are small children, and the way our society has evolved, we tend to stay in this very reactive pattern because we don't have tools to move out of it. We tend to use a lot of judgment to get through our day. This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. I'm not going to do that because this will happen. Like we predict the future. We use the past to determine what the future is going to be. And we very rarely stay in the present moment to truly discover what's happening right now. As this unfolds in our life, we develop anxiety, depression, eating disorders, maladaptive behaviors like addiction, alcoholism. We can become addicted to our own emotions and become very reactive to certain situations, which may or may not be truly as we are perceiving them, or maybe as our previously informed mind had perceived an event in the past. To really pull this all apart, my experience is a very vital part of our own healing journey. About 13 to 15 years ago, I can't remember exactly when, I was introduced to mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is an 8-week course that was developed by a man named Jon Kabat-Zinn, who was actually a molecular biologist from MIT, who was an observer. And he started seeing the connection between yoga, meditation, and our own physiology. When I experienced this class, I started seeing how my perception of the world changed, and the world around me changed. And it wasn't everything around me that was changing. It was me that was changing. It was my perception that changed. It dovetailed into changes in every aspect of my life. So since that first experience, I knew I had to become a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher because I wanted to bring this gift to as many people as I could. Since that time, I have taught children. I've taught adults. I've taught at yoga studios. I've taught at medical clinics. I've taught in churches, and now I'm teaching in my own practice to my patients this 8-week course. And if anyone is interested in learning more about it, you can go to my website. There will be notifications of upcoming classes. If there isn't the information that you're looking for, please leave a message, and that is BethClaxtonMD.com. Today we have with us our guest is Allan Goldstein, and Allan has his own journey through mindfulness that he's sharing. We have a conversation about each of our paths, and everyone's path is very unique, just like in our life. Everyone's path to mindfulness is very unique, and the gift that I want to give people when they are ready to receive it is the gift of seeing life through a new lens. We can always have the lens that we developed in our childhood, the reaction, the good, bad, the judgment-filled way of interpreting our life that is so pervasive on the news, is so pervasive on network TV and even in movies. We can choose to see life in a different way. We can choose to respond to it in a different way. And this way we have a choice. We can develop a choice of how we're going to live our life. And that is truly power. That's power to move ahead in a different way. It's power to determine the outcome of situations, and it's the power of reclaiming our health. So with that, I'd like to take a small break, and we will return to have a deep conversation with Allan Goldstein.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
Hi, and welcome back. Thanks for joining us on Rooted in Healing. Today we have with us, they're all special guests, but Allan is a special guest. Allan Goldstein has been steeped in mindfulness work since the early 90s, when he first walked into a mindfulness-based stress reduction class, otherwise known as MBSR, and never really walked back out. Over the years, he's founded MBSR Programs of Hawaii, helped lead the UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness, and co-created its Professional Training Institute, all while learning and collaborating with many of the field's guiding voices. These days, Allan is pouring his energy into the Mindful Teacher Community Network, a space designed to bring teachers and organizations together rather than apart. His passion is helping mindfulness teachers grow, feeling supported, and build a truly connected community. And I wanted him to come on just to talk about the practice of mindfulness-based stress reduction and the class and the impact that it can have in all of our lives from the very moment that we step into the classroom. And to begin today, Allan has offered to lead us in what we call an arriving practice. So welcome, Allan, and we'd love to say hello and then have you help us drop into an arriving practice.
Oh, thank you, Beth. It's such a pleasure to be here. Touched that you've reached out to me, and having this ability to speak to your listeners is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you. And as you mentioned, we will begin with an arriving practice. If you happen to be driving or doing something that calls your attention at the moment as you're listening to this, please don't engage in the meditation. We want you to get where you're going safely so you can simply listen in the background. But if you'd like to begin with a little bit of practice with us, I'd invite you to sit in a position that in some way incorporates a awake, dignified posture. And in so doing, you might want to begin to recognize that you are right here where you are. which may be a seat, a chair. You may be walking about. And simply noticing what's here for you. You can choose, if you're sitting, to close your eyes, leave them open. And bringing your attention to a focus, and in this brief arriving, let's let go of all that it took to get here, all that the busyness may have ensued during the day. Let go of any to-do lists for the future, and simply drop into a focus on breath and breathing. This next breath, as it moves in and it moves out from the body, that's all that's being asked. It's enough to simply notice breathing. And perhaps you might want to notice the qualities of the breath as it's moving. Maybe fast or slow, shallow or deep, hot or cold. Bringing your attention to the next in-breath and the next out-breath. Simply this breath that's been with you your entire life. And on the next out-breath, bringing the attention to the breath and breathing, moving at the abdomen. Perhaps noticing the rise and the fall of the abdomen with each breath. Any sensations that are present in the abdomen. Maybe sensations of fullness, emptiness, tightness of clothing, looseness. Breathing in, allowing attention to land on breath and breathing at the abdomen. And moving from this area of the body, seeing if you can expand your awareness of breath and breathing throughout the entirety of the body. Noticing the subtle changes in the body with each in-breath. And as you breathe out, any changes that occur with the out-breath. Various sensations that are in the body right now. And then the next out-breath, letting go again and bringing attention right to where you are, sitting in a chair, standing, moving. You might even ask yourself a very simple question to bring attention to the present moment. Where are my feet right now? Very helpful in terms of being in the moment with what's here rather than going off into the past or out into the future. So with that, we'll come back to our dialogue, Beth, and as our feet are both planted, connected by our conversation today.
Thank you so much. What I became keenly aware of is that before coming to the studio today, I reached for an electrolyte powder and accidentally grabbed an energy drink powder that I don't know how it ended up. So I could feel myself buzzing during that meditation, and I thought, why am I so buzzy? And realized, so these are the little insights that we get when we have a meditation practice.
Yeah,
and we slow down.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people perceive that, mindfulness teachers are mindful all the time. And this is brought up by my wife quite a bit in unmindful moments like that. And, doctors get sick, policemen get tickets, and mindfulness teachers have unmindful moments. So it's really about being human and not trying to attain anything, and recognizing those moments, which may be a little different than the times we're caught up in them without recognizing them.
Exactly. Yeah. I'd like to hear more about your first mindfulness-based stress reduction class and what happened there.
Oh, well, my very first class, that's a little bit of an interesting story. It was actually on 9/11 in 2001 that I was teaching. So do you want to hear that story, or do you want the class that I attended when I first took MBSR?
I was thinking about the first class you attended,
okay.
And then we can
Wonderful.
move into the 9/11 story. But I want
Sure.
to have our listeners understand the process of the mindfulness journey.
Yeah. So at the time, it was a rough patch in my life. I was having a lot of anxiety attacks and dealing with chronic pain. And I went to see my doctor, and he said, well, why don't you go down to see the person who is doing this program to look at chronic pain, and I think he'd be very helpful for the anxiety attacks you're happening. And he has an office here in the hospital. So I went to see him and signed up for the 8-week MBSR program. And during those 8 weeks, a lot happened, but one moment that changed my life and led me here to talk about this today is I was in class 6, and we were looking at mindful communication, effective and non-effective ways of communicating, and also thoughts that were beneficial or not. And one of those thoughts that's not so beneficial to have that was mentioned was catastrophizing. And I realized after we had spoken about that in the next meditation that we did, that my thoughts had drifted off to helping my friend clear some land 3 weeks from the date that I was in this class meditating. So it was very much in the future. And I was catastrophizing about, I don't want to traumatize the listeners, so I won't say exactly what I was catastrophizing about, but it was a very unpleasant experience that I was going to have as I was helping him clear the land. And I thought that was really interesting, to be thinking about this, that was going to happen in the future, 3 weeks from now, and labeling it a catastrophizing thought, which we'd just spoken about. So that was interesting in and of itself. It was like a bit of an aha moment that I was having catastrophizing thoughts. Then I left to go home that night. I left from the class and realized I was also, as I was driving home, thinking about the car that was coming at me in the opposite lane, veering off and getting into an accident. And I realized, there's another catastrophizing thought. And then very much along the way, the next few days after that, I realized I was catastrophizing about everything. And that was such an aha experience for me, to recognize I was having these catastrophizing thoughts, that it was something I didn't even see before. So I became very curious about it and started to notice when I had it. And through the meditation practice, because of the recognition of it and the naming of it, it shifted my relationship to it. So, what I can say is I still catastrophize today, but when I have a thought like that, I'm able to recognize it rather than be caught up in it. And it was such a life-changing experience that it led me to continue to be super curious about what this particular meditation practice and MBSR had brought to me and how it affected my life. It basically, I would say, saved my life from a lot of unpleasant experiences like catastrophizing thoughts. Not that they've gone away, but that shift in relationship really changed things for me. And I went on to study different aspects of the work and became a teacher, which got me to that point in 2001, where I had my first class on 9/11.
Wow. And was your class in the morning or the afternoon?
It was in the evening, and, the events of 9/11 happened early in the morning, and I had the TV on all day. I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I had 9 people signed up. So I felt a responsibility to go to that class. It was the first class I was going to teach. So I turned the TV off. I drove to the community college I was teaching at, and I waited for about a half hour. And of course, now I look back on it, it's pretty obvious that nobody would show up because of it being such an amazingly traumatic day. Nobody showed up, and I went home and turned the TV back on. But the whole zeitgeist of 9/11 permeated through the next 8 weeks when we finally did start the class the next week. It was quite an experience, and I just relate that because I think today it's almost like we're living some form of a 9/11 experience every day.
I agree.
Yeah. Maybe not as drastic, not as shocking for all of us all at the same time. But, this is the life we're living at this point.
Right.
So. And
I'd like to share my experience in this conversation because everybody has a unique experience in their journey to a mindfulness meditation practice. And my introduction to mindfulness-based stress reduction was actually an abbreviated class. It was only 6 weeks. And it, of course, couldn't be called mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it was at the community health center where I worked. The community health center offered it to practitioners. And for some reason, I was very drawn to it. And I went to it, and I was a practicing obstetrician gynecologist where, every moment there could be a catastrophe. At any moment. You could be called to the hospital for any catastrophe. So it was very helpful to watch myself stay in the moment more and really say to myself, well, there's nothing happening now. There's nothing happening now. And even when things would start to get amped up on the labor and delivery unit and things would start to go sideways, the nurses would call me, they'd all be panicked, and I'd come in and I would say, okay, what's really happening now? There are a lot of nurses that are amped up. Mom is okay. Baby's looking okay. All right, I think we can all calm down right now. Let's talk about what happened before. Let's talk about what could happen in the future. So we'll be ready, but we have time right now. And I'd say that up until that point, I had a knot in my stomach ever since the beginning of my residency about what's going to happen, when's the next shoe going to drop. And the mindfulness practice helped me shift that. And I said to myself, this is a missing link in medicine, like for doctors, for patients, for everything, to distill out that present moment in everything that's happening right now. I also watched my colleagues shift. And my colleague in OBGYN who was taking the class said, about 3 weeks into the class, she said, my mother-in-law is visiting this week, and she doesn't bother me as much as she normally does. Mm-hmm. It was great. So, yeah, from that point, I knew that I had to become a teacher to make this possible. And now there's so much information about neural inflammation and the inflammation that drives our bodies to have chronic pain, to have anxiety, to develop diabetes and obesity and toxicity just from being wound up.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid unless you have a practice of some kind or something to turn to. So very often, as we're talking about, in any given moment, we are okay, and we are safe, and there isn't a 9/11 happening. But then there are those times when there is some form of disruption that leads to our regulation, our self-regulation kind of going away in some form, whether it's anxiety about the future or depression and thoughts from the past. So to have a meditation practice, which is one of the things, if not the main thing that an MBSR program teaches, provides us the ability to have some equanimity, some calm when the storms are present.
And knowing that we always have our breath, which you so beautifully demonstrated at the beginning of this conversation. We always have our breath that we can turn to as an anchor.
Yeah, I think it's the most vital anchor that we can have. We can do without food for a long time, but if you want to try it, just hold your breath for a little bit here and see how long you can do without breath and breathing. And it's happening, fortunately, without our need to control it in any way. If we did have to control it, we'd probably really mess it up.
And it's always there.
Yeah, and has been there, and it's here now. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the history of mindfulness-based stress reduction and how it was developed?
Sure. Well, it was developed by John Kabat-Zinn, who himself was studying molecular biology at MIT, and at the same time exploring Zen Buddhism. And that led him to begin teaching yoga and realizing through those practices, Zen meditation and yoga, that there was something really lacking, as you're talking about, within Western medicine and the medical community. And that was this ability to bring awareness as part of a healing modality to our lives. So he got very interested into bringing the roots of his practices into Western medicine and developed this 8-week program, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, which he started teaching at a hospital associated with the University of Massachusetts, and that led him to develop the UMass Center for Mindfulness. So it really began in 1979 and probably is the biggest source of the reason we see the word mindfulness everywhere right now, because it proliferated and expanded into society based on scientific empirical evidence through studies along the way that kept showing that this kind of practice was beneficial for just about anything you can imagine. So as you said earlier, now we have a lot of research and we see that benefit very clearly. But back then it was very revolutionary to suggest to the medical community, especially doctors at the hospital that he was in, who had to give him space to hold these stress reduction programs that were based on meditation, that the meditation could be helpful in this way. So that's how it began, and here we are today.
And as I remember the story, he had a colleague that was a gastroenterologist, and he asked him what percentage of his patients he actually healed or actually saw changes, beneficial changes in from his treatment, the gastroenterology treatment, and it was small. It was 10 to 30%. And then once they were referred to it was called the stress clinic, right, at that point. And once they attended the stress clinic, then they all started seeing benefits in their symptoms or changes, positive changes in their symptoms. And I was curious, Allan, with your own journey, when you realized you were catastrophizing, was that the source of the anxiety or a big source of it?
That's a good question. I think so. There's many things one could be anxious about, but it was these particular catastrophizing thoughts that I was able to identify and see clearly and step out of it. It's kind of like, a fish in water doesn't know it's in water. Mm-hmm. And, if you're having thoughts, it could be catastrophizing, it could be anger, it could be really anything. If you're caught up in it and you don't have a way of kind of developing that meta-awareness, that meditation allows you to develop where you can observe what's happening, whether it's a sensation in the body or a thought in the mind or an emotion that you're having like anger. You're not aware of it. So it's really bringing awareness to what's there. And if I had to say there's one thing that was causing my anxiety more than anything, it was these catastrophizing thoughts.
Mm-hmm. How about your pain? Have you followed the thread of how that wove into your experience?
Yeah, well, the pain is interesting. I still have it, and we're looking at these things that have been with me for a very long time. And again, the relationship to the pain has changed, just like the relationship to the catastrophizing thought. Pain is an interesting word because we, go around and we use the word, oh, well, I'm in pain. But what is that? What exactly is the pain? So when you actually become curious about it, you can look at the pain as more of not such a broad brushstroke label as pain, but more specifically what it is. Is it burning? Is it numbing, tingling, stabbing? So that's like one level below the big broad brushstroke word of pain. And then you can even drop below those labels and just be with the pain as pure sensation. So it's almost letting go of the duality of good or bad, all the baggage that goes with the label, and getting really close to it. And when you have that ability, which again is a little bit like a meta-awareness of it in certain ways, you're not caught up in it, you're observing it, and you're observing it deeply, it shifts. So I would say my journey with my pain changed as I developed my meditation practice and my relationship to it, because it got me out of the stories, as I said, the baggage that goes with the narrative that I created around the pain. And now it's just, well, okay, I have the sensation. I could call it achy. I could call it pain. but it's simply a sensation. And when you get close enough to see the sensation, especially with pain, everything changes. So you get to kind of observe the ebb and flow of it. You're not as stuck in it. You're not as stuck in the stories and the narrative about it either. So it's been a really interesting journey, and I think that's true of just about anything that we create narratives around.
Exactly, and becoming separate from the narratives. So what in the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, what we do is from like the meditation that we started with, where we're following the breath, we then introduce following the breath and then noticing the thought, and then coming back to the breath and then noticing the thought. So this is where we start to connect the thought and being able to separate from it and anchoring with the breath. And that's just the beginning of teasing ourselves away from the thoughts and the stories that are going through the what we call monkey mind.
Yeah, and it's not kind of an instantaneous journey. It's one that builds over time. So there's a depth that is developed with a consistency of practice. And the research really hasn't developed the length of practice. What really seems to be most important is developing some kind of consistency around practice. And I think the 8-week program gives you that scaffolding to develop that.
Exactly. So so people understand it, instead of having a 1-hour meditation practice on Saturday and Sunday, developing a 15-minute practice every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't even have to look perfect. And we're also so tied up, it seems like, especially in our culture, Western culture, with quick fixes and, well, that didn't work. But the consistency of it, and it starts to unfold like a flower that opens really slowly. Wouldn't you say? How would you describe that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's beautiful. I think we could leave it at that. And the interesting thing around what you said is it doesn't have to be perfect. There's a lot of people who feel they can't meditate because they feel there's a certain experience to have. And it's not about anything more or less than the opening practice we had today. It's not about meditation practice being perfect or easy or this way or that way. It's really about simply stopping all the doing to be with what is. And what you find, as you mentioned earlier too, is there's always going to be thoughts. Some people say, I can't meditate because my mind's always going. Well, of course it is. And, that's what we refer to a little bit as the monkey mind. But that's what minds are supposed to do, or at least that's what brains do. They create thought. So everybody can meditate, and it's not about getting it any one particular way or it even being easy. As a matter of fact, the more difficult meditations, when you're sitting there and your mind is going at a mile or a minute, or that pain in your body is distracting you, and then you realize I've been distracted by the pain. Once you realize I've been distracted by the pain, it's simply come back to the breath. And it can be the most beneficial. The harder meditation practices actually, because of that distraction and the recognition of this distraction, can become the most beneficial.
Yes, and I also want to make sure that people know that a seated practice is not the only way that a meditation practice can begin. In every class, I tend to have a busybody or two, and have even had a family member who didn't come and talk to me, unfortunately, just drop out of the class because she couldn't hold still. And we offer, mindfulness-based stress reduction offers so many different types of meditation practice: walking, mindful movement, otherwise known as yoga, focusing on other aspects of our surroundings, maybe not the breath, maybe not the sensations in our body, focusing on the thoughts, focusing on sound. We can focus on anything as long as we're focusing.
Yeah, we have different practices and different anchors, and in a way, the 8-week program is a taster for these, and then people leave and they go off into the rest of their life and, can practice whichever one calls to them.
Yeah, and I think this is a funny story. One of the practices that we start with in the mindfulness-based stress reduction course is the body scan, where you have a guided meditation from your toes up to the top of your head, exploring parts of the body. And in my first class, I had that recording to do, and then we were instructed to move on to other practices. And I didn't. I listened to that recording for a year before I was able to move on to a seated practice. And it took multiple years before I could ever feel the energy around my heart. Mm-hmm. So it's unique to everyone, and I wanted to make that point to the audience that it doesn't look the same for any two people.
Yeah, and one of the terms we use, which comes from the book that John Kabat-Zinn wrote, Full Catastrophe Living, is that, the way to go through the 8-week program is as if it's one big experiment, where you're the experiment, you're the laboratory, you're the scientist, and you're the results. So it's simply about bringing curiosity to the experience of what takes place throughout the 8-week program. I could have never imagined in week 6 I would discover I was catastrophizing. That's what happened, and that changed my life.
Yeah. And also the definition of mindfulness. Do you want to, would you like to open that up for us?
Well, it's living each moment-to-moment awareness intentionally without judgment. So bringing awareness to each moment on purpose without judgment. Another definition I like to use is the attitudinal foundations, which all add up to defining mindfulness, for me at least, which are trust, patience, beginner's mind, non-striving, letting go, gratitude, generosity. So when you look at the attitudes that we try to cultivate in our practice, actually we don't try to cultivate them. If you practice, you just find them, and one attitude leads into all the rest. If you have patience, then you're not going to be striving. You are going to have trust. You are going to accept, and you are going to let go. So they, for me, also add up as a definition of mindfulness.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Mm-hmm. How do we find mindfulness-based stress reduction teachers or courses? because I know that you work with a lot of mindfulness teachers. How do we find them?
Well, there's different organizations that will list teachers. Generally, they're the organizations that provide teacher training. So I was at UC San Diego Center for Mindfulness, which is part of their integrative medicine department. And they will list some teachers. Brown University, the Center for Mindfulness at UMass. I think the easiest way is simply, if you're in an area, to Google mindfulness-based stress reduction teachers and then your location. And you probably will find a few, because the work has really grown over the years, and there's pretty much teachers in just about any location you can find.
Yes. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Any stories, any advice?
Well, I think main advice I might have is to live in the mystery, to be really curious about life in general and what you are experiencing. And again, you know, if you can do that moment to moment, great. But a lot of us are lost in the course of the day and caught up in all the doing of our lives. But if you can shift out of that doing mode into the being mode and bring curiosity to it and start to see the mystery of life, and by that I mean the interconnectedness of everything. When you start looking mindfully at things, you start to recognize that there's causes and conditions for the way things are, and everything's interconnected. Everything's always changing. And how that actually applies to living a peaceful, equanimous life. Most stress, most difficulties arrive from wanting things to be different than the way they are. So if you can land in a place where you're able to accept the way things are, if you're able to let go of the way things you want them to be, and this is not about rolling over with blind acceptance to what happens in life. It's really about making choices with more wisdom and discernment, because you kind of see the bigger picture, the breadth of the cloth of what is either going on or what's called for in any given moment. So that's something I find really interesting that practice has brought me, and as a result of taking MBSR, which led to my steady practice.
Yeah, that's great advice. I was actually wondering, should we read a poem?
I think that would be great. Hopefully you have one.
I have several of them here. Is there one that comes to mind?
Well, there's always the guest house.
That's true. I've got that right here.
Yeah.
This is we use a lot of poetry in mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's a way of getting in to a place that we can't really talk about. And this is a Rumi poem called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your stories and your sharing.
My pleasure, Beth. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing and bringing MBSR to the people in your locations and the world. And it's wonderful to speak to another MBSR teacher.
Always beautiful conversation. Thank you again. And we will be right back after this.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Beth Claxton, and today we've had a truly lovely, deep, grounded interview with Allan Goldstein, who's been a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher since 2001. He had his first class on 9/11/2001, which, as he talks about in the interview, led to a lot of introspection for all of his participants. There's a lot that I want to say about mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's something that has definitely been formative in my life. It is a course, an 8-week course in mindfulness that was developed by Jon Kabat-Zinn. It started in 1979 at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, which later developed into the Center for Mindfulness, where I did my training to teach this course. His book that Jon Kabat-Zinn wrote about the course is called Full Catastrophe Living, and it is applicable always, especially now, to everything that's happening in the world. So if you'd like to know more, if you'd like to take a deeper dive, read this book. It talks about week by week what happens in the class, stories of people that were taking the class, and also knowing that everyone's journey to their own state of mindfulness is unique. The definition of mindfulness, it's also helpful to remind ourselves it's being present in this moment without judgment. And that, when we start to pull that apart, it can be quite difficult. And yes, it can take an 8-week class to develop these skills. It takes a lifetime to develop these skills, and the results are so worth it. Allan also talks about attitudes that he brings to the practice, and these are trust, patience, a beginner's mind, letting go, acceptance, and generosity. So what if we were to take everything that happened to us every day and welcomed it with all of these attitudes: trust, patience, beginner's mind, letting go, generosity, and acceptance? I know my life would change. And if even a small group of us do this, the entire world can change. And what's amazing is that as your own perception changes, as you start to change your attitude, the world to you starts to look completely different. And it can even seem like you're living in a completely different reality, which you are. And the same situation looks completely different. And it's almost like children that grow up in the same household have different stories to tell about how they grew up, except you are both of those children with a different outlook on the same situation. How do you find a mindfulness-based stress reduction class? I teach locally in northern Arizona. My practice currently has moved to completely online because there's so many people from all over the state of Arizona, also from Washington State and New Mexico, where I have a medical license. I can teach in all three of those states. I offer classes twice a year, and I'm going to start offering an abbreviated 4-week mindfulness class as an introduction if someone wants to just get a taste. So this will be starting in January of 2026. You can also go to the Center for Mindfulness. They have 8-week courses that are taught online. And there are many other ways to find teachers, as Allan mentions in the session today. You can go online and put mindfulness-based stress reduction in your city, and you're likely to find a mindfulness-based stress reduction course in your area. You can find me at BethClaxtonMD.com. My practice is Beth Claxton MD Functional Medicine. You are listening to Rooted in Healing, and tune in on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. on KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM in Sedona. Prior episodes can be found on KAZM's website library, and that website is mellowmountainradio.com. And until the next time, I invite you to, with presence, without judgment, in the present moment, find what makes you feel truly vibrant and go for it.